Welcome to GFB Express. I'm your host, Garrett McClintock, and today we're talking about the Florida State Seminoles, and we're talking about the death of the Pac-12. Is reported, it says ACC insiders, this is from Bleacher Report, so, take it for what it's worth, but a university source told Sports Illustrated Pat 40 that no deal is closed for Florida State to leave the conference, but multiple other ACC sources have said that they would not be shocked to see the Seminoles serve formal notice of a 2025 move. Remember, we talked about earlier this week that they missed the deadline for 2024 and in the coming days or weeks. Earlier this month, Florida State President Richard McCullough said that the Seminoles would very seriously consider leaving the ACC unless there was a radical change to the revenue distribution. Now, you can want a radical change to the revenue distribution, but push come to shove, there just isn't enough money. The pie isn't big enough to radically change it if you're trying to get up to the amount of money that the Big Ten and the SEC are making. So will we see something coming in the next, week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month for 2025? Maybe. Could also be 2026. They're going to give themselves a runway so they can try to negotiate it. Or maybe they say, hey, you want to get the lawyers out? Let's go. But there's also plenty of lawyers in Tobacco Road. There's plenty of guys who went to Duke, went to UNC, who have money and time to burn and are willing to volunteer to fight on behalf of the rest of the ACC schools to get that payout. Because there still is in the grant of rights, there is no provisional clause for how to buy out of it or get out of it. And that's the issue. So you have to come up with one and argue in court what that should be and what is reasonable. Reasonableness depends on the judge, depends on their mood that day, depends on a lot of things. So this is something, I know it was from Bleacher Report. That was just the compiled article that had the quote. But so it's not some nobody, I've seen Jim Williams out here going off of this Sportskeeda website, which I'd never even heard of till 2 weeks ago, making up reports where they're quoting MHV or 3. It's not that. It's not right away. It's not now, but it appears that it may be coming. Also, a report from Brett McMurphy on the Pac-12. A couple of weeks ago, we said that the Pac asked for $50 million a school. Brett McMurphy quoted Brady McCullough, who is a sports reporter for the LA Times. And he said, George Klavkov tried blocking UCLA's move to the Big Ten with Cal Regents. That was a long time. And he spent 6 months trying to do that rather than just figuring out, okay, it's done, we got to move forward. Then in October of 2022, ESPN offered Pac-12 $30 million a school, but a Pac-12 president who, quote, worked with a professor on his campus, and the professor estimated that the school's market value was $50 million a school. So the Pac-12, based on this professor's advice, asked for $50 million a school. ESPN said no. So if this was one school, this is just a massive miscalculation. Obviously, everything that George Klavkov did, he looked like a clown. And I know Larry Scott got them into the situation. The presidents enabled it. George Klavkov was the final nail in the coffin. It's been a disaster for over a decade. But if it was one school, say it was Oregon, Oregon may be worth that much, but they, on their own, totally, and, depending on who they're playing, whatever, but they, if Oregon, or Washington, whoever it is, but that does not mean the entire rest of the league is worth that much. And a professor out of school who's a fan of the school probably overestimated. They made some big assumptions in their favor, thought, well, we'll take the liberal approach and then we'll come in and then maybe we don't want to go in with a conservative number. We want to start high and be, willing to settle, but they just completely missed the mark. It is still just, it is just laughably clueless. And Bob Thompson retweeted this, the former president of Fox Sports, and he said, something, and he said, he's the retired president of Fox Sports Networks. He said, over the years, he's realized that many university presidents don't understand business. They understand very little about sports, and even fewer understand the sports business. The sports business is a very niche thing. There's something, any live rights, there's nothing else like it in the world. And especially for collegiate athletics, when you're trying to balance all these things, like there's no other thing where you have this collective grant of rights where you can potentially move when you're talking about things. There's no alternative to the NBA. You're collectively getting you are going to have your regional broadcast contract. You're going to have the league deal for the nationally broadcast games. That's it. It's pretty cut and dry. Every team is doing their own regional deal. It's not, you don't have these conferences where you're banding together and, the Lakers don't have to make sure they cover the local TV deal for, the Bucks or somebody in a small market where the numbers just aren't really moving the needle. They don't have, or the Memphis Grizzlies, they don't really have that issue because they're collectively doing it and everyone's on the same playing field. Where even you have that massive disparity between Conference USA and the SEC, and versus a professional league where you got a salary cap or a luxury tax that's keeping everyone pretty similar in line. It's just different and not the same, and it is a very niche thing, and you have to understand the big picture, because in Brett Yormark has said this multiple times. It wasn't just that the Pac-12 was trying to get a deal. It was looking ahead saying, the NBA is trying to renew their deal. UFC is bigger. They merged with WWE. They want a bigger deal. There's multiple other sports that have deals coming up, and there's only so many TV slots and so much limited airtime. And what do they want in? So that is, you're not just competing against another conference. You're competing against all of live sports. And obviously on Saturday afternoons, college football is still king and always will be. But that doesn't change that there's still other things, especially in that late night slot, where, maybe it's cheaper to run a NASCAR rerun instead of paying this in the unit economics of broadcasting a singular event in that late night window is very much up for debate. And we saw that they only really want to commit to one conference. And so that's what they got in the Big 12, and the Pac-4 is dead. There was also a report yesterday from Brett McMurphy that Condoleezza Rice, who's a Stanford alum, and George W. Bush, who's an SMU alum, are both lobbying the ACC for candidacy. I don't know what good that's going to do them. The president's kind of made up their thing. It kind of feels like similarly to, how the Oklahoma and Texas had to get some resolution before the Big 12 officially expanded. We got to figure out the Florida State situation before the ACC makes a move, because otherwise, why are Florida State and Clemson going to say yes to adding more schools when a potential vote to dissolve the conference or to somehow change the grant of rights, now they're going to be outnumbered even more. And so that's not, their yes votes are not going to be there. Reportedly, there was 4 schools against it, and they needed 1 school to flip. Who that school is and who Florida State, Clemson might be sucking up to try to, keep them on their side, that's very much to be determined. But maybe they can get that 1 school to flip. But you can bet that Florida State and Clemson, they got to figure their crap out, and maybe Miami too, before we see any movement on schools moving to the ACC. But Stanford's the domino. Whatever they're going to do is going to decide. Does the Pac-4 merge with the American? Do they go to the Mountain West? Do they go to the ACC? Is Stanford going to go independent? All of that, it all hinges on Stanford and Florida State, and we'll keep watching in the coming weeks. Please like, subscribe, and share. Thank you for watching today, and come back tomorrow for more GFB Express.